Right, rook and 2 pawns versus rook and 1 pawn, in the case of those pawns being disconnected and one of the pawns being passed. So white has a passed pawn here on f4, whilst at the same time we have pawns on a4 and a7 that are sort of on the same file, facing each other off. Conditions are good for white in this position, and the main reason for that, or a couple of reasons really. One is that the black rook is very passive. It's just stuck on the 7th rank defending the a7 pawn. And the other one is that if you have passed pawns in rook endings, and your opponent has passed pawns as well, you want your king supporting your passed pawns and leave your rook to deal with your opponent's passed pawns. If your opponent doesn't have any passed pawns, you still want your king dealing with helping your passed pawns, and yeah, your rook doesn't have to deal with anything because your rook can do some attacking as well. So we've got our king supporting, with my strange colour schemes, we've got our king supporting our passed pawn, which is great. Something that black does have going for them is that this king is in a great place. Okay, so this is a game from 1975, by the way, where Tony Miles is white and is about to play it very well, is about to finish it off. So yeah, this king is very well placed. I mean, if you took the a pawns off the board, it's just drawn straight away. That's a very easy draw for black. So white is relying on the fact that these 2 pawns are on the board, and conditions, like I say, are favourable. Dvoretsky talks about if this pawn was on the b file, for example, black's drawing chances increase dramatically. I mean, ignoring the specifics of that initial position where I think immediately white would have trouble defending the b pawn, but even just more generally, where white's got a sensible move to begin with, the pawns on the other side of the board where the passed pawn isn't, if they are on adjacent files, then the defending side's rook doesn't have to be as passive. And if the defending side can swap those pawns, then yeah, very likely, especially if their king's blockading the passed pawn, that it's going to lead to a drawn position. Anyway, let's see how white finishes this particular position off. So rook a6. Okay, I mean the plan is really just to try and get the pawns forward first of all, and just to generally improve the position. Rook c7. Black does nothing. White shuffles the king to the side to get the f pawn coming through. King g7. f5. Pawn comes through. Black does nothing. a5. Black does nothing. And then white brings the rook to d6. The plan here is to push the a pawn and bring the rook round the back. It's a very good plan, and black doesn't have a defence against it. King f8 played, rook d8 check, king e7, rook to h8, now threatening the swapping of the rooks, which would be very good for white in this position. Obviously, it's just completely won. King d6 to avoid that. But I mean, the black king has sort of gone on a bit of a journey. I think it actually went to g7, didn't it? It's finally ended up on d6. And it's just now out the way of this f pawn, which can start coming through. Rook to c1, I guess hoping to do some damage from behind, but isn't going to do much damage from behind. And then, yeah, the principle of 2 weaknesses, do not hurry, rook a8, very good move. Just attack black's a pawn, and we've still got the threat of this f pawn coming through. I mean, you might even force black to play a passive rook c7 defense of that a pawn, which is then clearly horrendous for black because of this f pawn coming through. Instead, black tried to stay active with king e5, rook e8 check. If king d6, we could see rook e6 check, king d7, rook a6. And now the black rook's probably going to have to go passive on c7 and the f pawn comes through. So instead of king d6, black played king f4. But then the f pawn just got pushed. Check, king hides, a pawn attacked, king out the way. If the a pawn's taken, f7 is immediately winning. So king f5, f pawn got pushed anyway, check, king f8, king g6, rook e6 check, and black resigned. So yeah, very good technique from white there. Improved his position to the max, threatened that excellent plan, and then just used the sort of the principle of 2 weaknesses with that rook a8 move. So the f pawn's coming through and this pawn's being attacked. But at the end of the day, it was conditions were very favourable for white. I don't think that was a particularly difficult position to win. Sure, good technique and Miles made it look easy, but the engine's saying +5. I think it is fairly easy that this pawn is supporting the king. Sorry, is supporting the passed pawn. Let's go back 2 years in time to 1973 to this game, where conditions are again very favourable for the attacking side. Here's your passed pawn on the queen side, the passed b pawn, and you remember your king, the attacking side's king. You want it with the pawn, so we want the king with that pawn, and we can leave the rook to do other stuff. So we haven't got our king with the pawn at the moment, but the defending side's king is horrendously placed. I mean, it's on the edge of the board. It's in a dreadful place there on h3, and that's what's going to make this pretty easy, to be honest, for black to win. Now, one thing you can do in positions like this is make sure your rook defends both your pawns laterally, and then just move your king to the passed pawn. And that's a plan that black can have here, and there's really just nothing that white can do about it. So rook d5 was played in this game, and then white played rook f7 check. You might be wondering why doesn't white play rook e7 to stop the king crossing the e file? Black plays b5, so there's your lateral defence that I was talking about. The rook defends both its pawns laterally, whilst at the same time usefully stopping the white king making the same journey over to the queen side if it ever gets away from h3. And white would be like, well, all right, I'm going to stop you making that same journey. And so b pawn pushed, rook e8, you're still not making that journey. That's it, your king's not coming past the e file, and we just say, well, it is rook e5. When you play rook e5, you've got to be careful of g4 check. It doesn't do anything. King f4, king f6, black's fine, and yeah, the black king is going to be making its way over to the b pawn, and this is going to be gone very soon. And by the way, the swapping of rooks, you'd think it favours the attacking side, and it does most of the time, but we're going to see a position later where if the swapping of rooks is good for the defending side, like you suddenly get a pawn race and the defending side could draw or even win, then that in itself gives the defending side even more of an advantage, which we get that in our chess games all the time, don't we? That the side that can afford the swap of a particular set of pieces gets an advantage out of that, because they can force their opponent to make moves they don't want to because they're the one trying to avoid the swap. It's just as simple as that. And that's the case here. White would have to move away from that swap, and the black king is in. So in the game, rook f7 check played, the black king comes over, and I mean, I don't really know why white carried this on, because it's such an obviously winning position now. The black king comes over. The white king challenges the black rook, but we just put it on c5. And the b pawn's just getting pushed. I mean, white is absolutely helpless here. King c3 played. Maybe a bit of a waste of time that, because it's got to go back to b4 after that check. Rook back to b1. Check. King moves. Still a lateral defence, but we've got a pawn on g4 now. King g5. A bit of an odd move there, king c. I mean, white resigned here. I would have played king a3 here, just to avoid this sort of messing about with that check, but yeah, fine. So how do we summarise that? Rook laterally defends the two pawns. King marches over to the passed pawn. Your rook that's defending is going to sort of naturally perform a second function of not letting the defending king cross. It's over. Next, this is a game from 1993. Already you can see the defending side has big advantages over the previous position. One is that their king is already blocking the passed pawn. Now, if the defending side's king is blocking the passed pawn, what the attacking side wants to do is make a beeline with their king to the other pawn. that's how you're going to win that. I mean, sometimes even in the case of, if that pawn then gets defended by rook, say, you bring your rook round and win it, and the other side's king is going to be way too far away. So you're going to have rook and pawn versus rook or something with the defending side king over here. So that would be the general plan. If the defending side's king is blockading the pass pawn, just take your king over to the other pawn and you can win it from there. The transposing into rook and pawn versus rook is probably going to be one. And swapping everything off into king and pawn versus king, that's blatantly going to be one, isn't it? You can imagine black king on g4 and the pawn's on g5. The only way that's going to be a draw is if the white king is on g2 and it's black to move. So that's not going to be happening, isn't it, from the b5 square. Anyway, all that said, I mean, you might have been looking at that thinking, well, that's fascinating, John, but how does the black king get to f4? Sorry? This white rook is brilliantly placed. The black king does not cross the 6th rank. The black rook does not come off the 5th rank. White's like, what are you going to do? And by the way, I'm probably going to play king b4 in a minute. I'd have to sort of dot the i's and cross the t's, but it's probably going to be equivalent to something we're about to see. Both sides have got a lot of analysing to do, a lot of counting to do on the resultant position, because in a minute the only way black's going to be able to progress is to come and nab this pawn, swap it for this one, and it's all going to come down to, well, white's got a massive disadvantage there. They need their king over here. That's the journey. But black's got a big problem. Like, how do they get their king down the board? Especially as the white rook stopping them across the 6th rank for now. I suppose they'd have to come this way, wouldn't they? Once the white rook has taken the b pawn. So there's a lot going on, and a lot of counting that needs doing. So what do you do as black? I mean, there are two winning moves here, but one of them's just a silly engine move of a tactic, and then you have to play the move you need to play in a minute anyway. So, I mean, which is rook c1, by the way, because it protects the pawn subtly like that. But you still need to bring your rook back and do the move you've got to play anyway. So let's ignore that and try and find the only one winning move other than waiting a couple of moves before playing the only winning idea. Let's find the only winning idea. It's not this. It's not just rook c4 straight away, because rook takes b5, and at this point you'd be like, okay, well, white's given up control of the 6th rank there. That's good, isn't it? Now we can bring our king in. Okay. Our rook is nicely placed. That's stopping the white king from crossing the c file. So yeah, let's not take the pawn on g4 straight away. Let's bring our king in. Your rook's hanging. Oh, yeah, can't do that. So in this position, black would have to play rook takes g4 straight away, and the king's coming across. And they're going to get a draw by a crucial tempo. It's the fact that rook was hit on c4. That was the problem. King d3, rook f4. Black's trying to set up a sort of vertical cutoff. Rook back to b1. Let's look at black's choices here. If king h5, white king just comes across to e3, and it's very difficult to see how black makes progress there. You've got a vertical cutoff by just one file, but it's not going to be great. You've got a knight's pawn. We can see check, 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 check there if the king tries to come in. The rook's got no sensible way to, you kind of want to play moves like this, setting up a block when the king comes in, but there's just nothing because the king's on this brilliant e3 square. So king h5 is no good. What if black just pushes the g-pawn? Okay, well, that's actually quite a good winning try. What white wants to do here, whilst the black king is still quite up the board, because the black king's got to get down the board, basically, what white wants to do is bring their king to e2 and play rook f1. And that will force either a swap of rooks, which is hopefully going to be favourable, if we can then get our king to g2 before black gets their king to h3, that will be favourable for us. Or if black doesn't want that swap, then our king's coming across the f-file. It's exactly the thing I was talking about a minute ago. The side that doesn't want the swap gets a disadvantage. They have to cede something. In this case, the white king crossing the f-file. Unfortunately, king e2 is a losing move. Watch this. This is brilliant. King g5, white's like, yeah, rook f1. Swap rooks, great. King h4, king g2, it's a draw. Bosh. Whoa. What's that? That's nasty. Yep, that's nasty. You're dead. Oh dear. Oh dear. Can't play king e2. So this move g4 is looking pretty good. g4, and my plan to come and swap rooks isn't a good plan because of that g3 thunderbolt. But g4 does have a disadvantage to it, and that is that you just undefended your rook. So king e3, what does black do here? If they defend their rook, I think rook b5 would either win it, or you're going to swap rooks on f5 and play king f2, and that's easily drawn. So the only way that black can sort of do anything there to try and make progress is to bring their rook back. Then you play king e2. King g5, rook f1, and the thunderbolt isn't there. g3 is a load of rubbish. Rook takes f5, king takes f5, king f3. Rook swap, king h4, king g2 would be a draw. So in the original position, just going for it, rook c4, doesn't work. Now, analysing all of that as black, imagine being in this position as black and saying, oh, if I play rook c4, seeing all those variations all the way to the end. Especially that g3 thunderbolt as well, although that would actually be one of the ones on your side if white played it badly, if white didn't play the king e3 and the king e2 finesse in that particular setup. I mean, seeing all of that's a big, big ask. Okay, but what's not a big ask is to appreciate you only have one way to make progress here, which is you've got to swap the g pawn for the b pawn. And when you do that, the white king is going to be charging over here, and the black king is going to be charging down here. It's going to be some sort of race. There's blatantly going to be some sort of attempt to get back with some sort of vertical cutoff. That's going to be going on, and the precise details of it, sure, they're hard to analyse, but that's going to be happening in a minute. In the variation we just looked at, rook c4 takes, we haven't got the option to play king f6, which is quite a nice move. We'd like to play that, to be honest, especially because our rook is stopping the white king crossing the c file. But we had no choice, our rook's hanging. So, given all of that, is there another move that just delays things, even without calculating it deeply? Is there another move that delays things and just gives you another crucial tempo? Well, you don't know it's crucial. It just gives you another tempo, and you haven't got a clue if it's a good idea or not. But it's a tempo. It might be useful, and it's this king g7. Wow, brilliant! This rook is brilliantly placed. It's saying you're not moving your rook off the 5th rank. You're not crossing the 6th rank. But it's so brilliantly placed that it can't move. You know, if it gives up control of the 6th rank, the king's in. If it gives up control of the b file, rook c4 comes with no taking of the pawn. And that would be the crucial tempo that you need. I mean, we've been through the variations and we know that we need one crucial tempo. But even during a game, what I'm trying to say now is that if you see you can gain a tempo with no loss, you may as well. It might prove crucial later. I mean, the only other thing I can suggest is that we analyse every single one of those variations, which I think would be very, very hard. I mean, for me personally, it would be like, oh, I can see there's going to be some sort of vertical cutoff. I think it's one for black, or I think it's drawn, but I'm a bit hazy on the details, and I bet you there's something subtle I've missed, like that king e3, king e2 finesse. You know, I mean, that's the difference, isn't it, between the top players and us sort of club players, is that maybe they have just got that extraordinary calculation ability. But I also know that they get lazy and would do things like this, where they just work out, well, I can gain a tempo by doing that. There's no disadvantage to it whatsoever. Yeah, I may as well do that. It might prove crucial later. You know, they do that as well, and I'm saying that we can do that. So king g7. If the white king comes in to b4, then rook c4 check. If the king goes back, we've gained that crucial tempo. We can play king. We'd probably have to play rook takes g4, but it's still going to be crucial tempo enough because the king's going to come in. I was about to say we could play king f6 there, but we can't. The rook's still controlling the f6 square, so the king can't go back. But you can see the king going forward has sort of given white a bit of a problem straight away, a bit of a headache. Rook takes g4. In that, I mean, we've got a horizontal cutoff, but white's got a horizontal cutoff as well, and there is a race going on. The white king is racing this way, and we have, as black, we've got to try and do something now to get our king across the 6th rank. Because the pawn's not going to do it by itself. The pawn and the rook aren't going to do it by themselves, unfortunately. So after king c5, black's only got one winning move here, and the idea is that we're going to come and challenge the black rook on h6, so that when it moves back, obviously that rook can't be swapped, rook b1, we can then bring our king to the h5 square. Not straight away. King h5 here would be very silly, obviously, because of rook h1 check, but there's your horizontal cutoff. The king's coming into h5. That's fairly clearly gone. Okay. And I think we can see that here. When we play king g7, if white comes in with the king, I can see that I'm going to get to this position. I think that's a possible, very hard, but I think that's possible, even for players of our level. So king g7, brilliant move. White rook can't move. What if the white king goes back? Well, that's the crucial tempo you need. Rook c4, rook takes the pawn on b5, and then this is the bit where you don't nab the g pawn. If you nab the g pawn, that's just transposed straight away into the other line, because the king's gone from, well, I say it's just transposed. Our king's on g7 instead of f7, so if anything, it's worse for black, but certainly it's no better for us. But the point is our rook's not hit, so we can play king f6. King b3. You might be wondering why white doesn't try rook f5 check there. It looks a bit annoying, doesn't it? Because the black king's got to go backwards. But it's not really backwards, because the g-pawn's about to fall anyway. And so it's just a different route. It's going to, the black king is going to come to h5. The white king still can't cross the c-file. There's a prophylactic rook f1, I suppose, because after rook takes g4, your rook was going to be hit anyway, and your king can't cross the c-file. So rook takes g4, king tries to get across, and yeah, I mean, we're going to see shuffling of king and pawn. Lucena is nigh in that particular case, so not rook f5 check. King b3. I think we're actually following the text of the game still. Remarkable in this 1993 game. Both players playing some sort of excellent moves. Rook takes g4. The king desperately tries to get across, and then black goes for this two-file vertical cutoff with rook e4. King d3. Rook back to e8. What can white do here? King d2 is what was played in the game. I mean, you're meant to, with vertical cutoffs, try and get your rook down and sort of, do checks from the front. But it's, I mean, even though it's a knight's pawn, which is usually disadvantage for the attacking side because of the lack of space, and there's no I free square, for example, to do Grigoriev's combined method, black can just push it straight away, and it's already off black's 4th rank. So this is going to be absolutely fine if the white rook does anything from the front, because we can attack the rook and defend our pawn at the same time. Not literally, but the zigzag idea. So, yeah, I mean, if white plays king d2, the idea behind king d2, I suppose, is white's desperately trying to get a rook swap in before the black king has time to come down the board, and it's just not in time here. can't stop the black king getting to the h3 square, which is one of the 3 key squares. We've talked about the zigzag, so I suppose the only other disadvantage of g4 is that white could now play rook b5, again doing a horizontal. There's all these cut-offs going on, isn't it? White's cutting off our king, we're cutting off white's king. But black can just push the g-pawn, the king can't cross, rook e4, pawn gets hit, rook behind, rook back to b1, and the black king can come in. So yeah, not rook b1. In the game, king d2 was played. Black brings their king round via h5. Rook to b1. Black does have the chance to chuck it away here, actually, interestingly. The reason king d2 has been played, of course, is that white's trying to get this rook swap thing that I mentioned. And if black plays g4, that's now a draw. Because the black king's not going to be able to get to those key squares in time. So black's over-pushed their pawn if we're going to transpose into a king and pawn ending. And that swap's favourable for white. So black has to avoid it. And then the king has crossed. And that's a knight's pawn, isn't it? So that's going to be first rank defence. Very, very easy. So not g4, but I mean, there's lots of winning moves here for black, to be honest. But I think a lot of them aren't particularly winning moves. They just go around in circles. Like the engine's saying king f5 and king h5 are possible, but I think you'd have to just go back to g6 and then do rook e5 anyway. This white king coming down to d2 has meant that it's now got 2 moves just to get back up and start hassling that rook. So whilst we're laterally defending this pawn, this king can do all sorts of zigzagging down to attack a rook that's checking it from the front. If rook e1 is played, then takes, and we're going to get to the key square. In the game, rook g1 was played, and then black just starts the zigzagging and white resigned. So yeah, absolutely loads going on in that game. And I guess it's up to you whether you accept the argument. I'm claiming that we could look at rook c4, see the sort of position we're about to get into, and say, well, it's pretty damn close, whether that's a win or a draw. I'm not 100% sure. But my word, this white rook is so well placed. I kind of want an extra move here, and with this waiting move, I can get one. I don't know if it's going to be enough for a win, but it's better than just going for rook c4 straight away. So there's your king b2. That's where I get the extra move. I guess the only thing you'd have to analyse is like, well, hang on, if I play king g7, it's all very well saying, yeah, I'll get a waiting move, and you know, I don't know whether it's good for me or not, but it's an extra tempo, so I might as well take it. Well, what about this? So that needed analysing. Anyway, that's what I'm claiming. It's up to you whether or not you agree with me. And whether you agree with me or not, it turns out that rook c4 doesn't win, and the brilliant king g7 does. So there you go. One more position that I'm going to go through in this video, and this is a game from 1909 involving Marshall and Capablanca. So Marshall is obviously doing very well here with this pawn, passed pawn over here. The white king is already nicely placed, sort of supporting it. What does black do? I mean, can you see any drawing plan at all? Pause the video and decide. So yeah, I mean, it looks pretty bad, this entire position for black. As the defending side, 2 things you want to look out for, aside from the just following the rules of where you want your king and all the rest of it, and just try and be as active as possible. So active king, active rook. But two things you can look out for. One is, can you swap the rooks in such a way that it's not necessarily a disadvantage for you? I mean, if we just took the 2 rooks off the board, then white's won. The h-pawn just queens. So, but is there a way to swap the rooks where it's not just a case of white's won? There's a pawn race going on. So always be on the lookout for rook swaps that might be advantageous to you. And secondly, if you can find a way to just win one of the 2 pawns, but it means you're sacrificing your rook for the other. So for example, if we could magically take this A pawn with our king and use our rook to lose itself for the white H pawn, then we'd be in king and pawn. Me and my colour schemes. King and pawn versus rook. So yes, it's rook versus pawn, and maybe there's a drawn version of that. So that's a couple of tries that you have as the defending side, and obviously the attacking side should be aware that that's what the defending side's going to be trying to do. Capablanca was pretty famous for being extraordinarily good at endgames, as well as extraordinarily good at chess in general. And he found a drawing plan here that it wasn't perfect. There was a problem with it, which we'll get onto. But he found a drawing plan here that involved both of those ideas. And it goes like this. Rook c7 check. Okay, white goes king g6. Very natural move, supporting the h-pawn as it goes up to become a queen. Rook b7. White's like, whatever. Pushing my h-pawn. Bosh. Thunderbolt. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. What a brilliant move. Rook b4. If that rook's taken, rook swap, pawn race. So you just wouldn't think it, would you? You look at this initial position and say, oh yeah, black can swap rooks and draw. You just, if someone said that, you're sort of all crowded around the board and say, oh yeah, black can swap rooks here and draw. You just think, well, he's obviously an idiot. How can black swap rooks here and draw? It's like this. Like, rook round the back. Pawn race. Check. Draw. I mean, good luck drawing that against Stockfish. I haven't got on to queen endings yet, but I do know that in this sort of position, you want your king in this corner, and it's already quite close. You started off with a check, but to be continued. But yeah, that is a draw. Okay, so white can't take the rook, and then we're back to like, okay, so a swap's being offered. White, who's obviously winning this game, or if anyone's winning this game, it's white that wants to try and get the win, can't have that swap. So white has to cede ground with king g5. Okay. In fact, king g5 was actually played in this is what actually happened in the game. And there's still only one drawing move, which is king takes a4, h5, king a3. King a3, there was a reason why couldn't king b3 be played? Oh, I can't see it off the top of my head. So king a3 was absolutely necessary. No, I'm just going to have to cheat. Sorry, I should have prepped this. Oh yes, rook takes b4, check. And now you're in the way of a b pawn. And if you take with the king, it's rook's pawn versus rook's pawn. So king a3 had to be played. These are all moves that Capablanca played, so absolutely brilliant. h6, rook b8, h7, a4, rook h4, rook h8, and king g6, king b3, king g7, takes, king takes h7, a3. It's a draw. Okay. Where had we got to? So yeah, that was a brilliant way to draw that game, and both the ideas of things that we talked about, the drawings that the defending side should be on the lookout for, offer a rook swap if the conditions are favourable, pawn race, draw, or if you can win the pawn, win the a pawn, and somehow you lose your rook for the white h pawn, we can still get a draw by a drawn version of rook versus pawn. And I'd forgotten about king a4. King a3, what a brilliant move in the finale to that. Anyway, there's loads more to say about this because, okay, Capablanca's played this rook c7 check. Brilliant idea, and we've seen why it's so good. But if Marshall had sort of been wise to what was going on and had seen this plan, it's very easy to thwart it with king e6. So if rook b7, king e5, rook b4, takes, a pawn gets pushed, king c3, pawn race. This time you're not queening with check. Queen f3 check. If king c4, obviously that's a swap of queens straight away. And if instead king d2, queen f2 check, king c3, queen d4 check, and the swap of queens to follow next move, either queen e4 check or queen b6 check, I think, looking at those two. Yeah, the king can only go to b3 or c2, can't it? Queen swap win for white. And all of that means is that rook c7 check, this plan, brilliant though it is not a winning plan, because white should have worked it out and played king e6. But we can still do the same idea. Rook c6, double exclamation mark, is the only drawing move, and it has that plan to it. White can't even cross the 6th rank now. So what might we see instead? Well, white thinks, okay, I'm just going to push the h-pawn. Rook b6. If the h-pawn gets pushed, then we can come back to h6 with the rook. So the white rook has to defend that and come behind it with rook h4. And I'll tell you what, pause the video here and work out what would you play as black. It's not a million miles away from the exact point I was making in the last position. And I think on this one, even people who disagreed with me on the last position, where I was saying, oh, you might as well play king g7 because you're going to get extra tempo out of it. And who knows, that might be crucial later. I think you can definitely do it here. So if you just play rook takes h5, you've lost. This is a lost version of rook versus pawn. Okay. The white king is on this diagonal, and watch the way it finishes off. By the way, black had to play king b4 there because the a5 pawn was attacked. And we're just going to see the the sort of checking from behind, chasing the black king down the board. This only works against a rook's pawn, remember, because black's got this knight check. It's pretty nasty when it's a knight's pawn as well. I mean, the grandmasters have even messed this up with the knighting on b1. It is hard, but it's not hard here. I mean, this is just trivially gone. So against the rook's pawn, you can do this when we covered that in rook versus pawn. So you can't play rook takes h5. But all you need to do, I mean, the white king can't come back across this rank. Your rook's attacking the h-pawn. So just keep your king attacking the a-pawn. This rook can't move. It is tied down. And there is nowhere sensible for the white king to go. So you can just go back and forth on a3 and b3 until, I mean, the white king is literally in this box. Where can the white king go in that box that's of any use whatsoever? Well, g7 is the only square that's of any use whatsoever. You know, you think, oh, I can't play king g7 because I've analysed it and it turns out to be a draw. It's like, well, what else are you going to do? There's nothing else. The white rook can't move, and the white king is in this box. So g7 is the only square that white can use. Then you take the h-pawn. I mean, it's just incredible stuff, isn't it? The white king is not on that diagonal anymore. It's not close enough to this side of the board, basically, to come round from behind and do that one rank down at a time checking thing. King takes a4. I mean, it tries to get over king b4. But yeah, I mean, I haven't actually got the moves in my prep here. I could sort of just look at the engine moves and do them. I mean, what would white do here? So king e5, a4. What does white try? So there isn't time to, by the way, to go for the crossroads position. Well, white could maybe try and do that. King d4, a3. So I've just noticed that king b3 is not a good idea there. What's wrong with king b3? Just out of interest, are we going to get the same thing? So yeah, but black does have to be careful. Of course, yeah, we're going to get the same thing. But yeah, in this position, black would play a3, and yeah, I mean, if white tried to, they're way too late, aren't they, for the crossroads position? They'd need to be here already with I don't know. It's actually, they're very close. It's there. It's black to move. So white plays a win, black plays a draw. It's a draw. I think that's everything covered on that position. I hope everyone liked all of those ideas. I've got more positions to go through on rook plus 2 pawns versus rook plus 1 pawn in the case of disconnected passed pawns and one of them passed. 3 more positions, in fact, that I've been looking at. But one of them is just, I mean, the very next one, in fact, is a game from 1947. I'll just show you the starting position, which is that. And it is black to play, if you wanted to have a think about it. Wow. There's like 2 pages of analysis just on this one game in the Dvoretsky Endgame manual. So, yeah, it's going to be pretty tough to sort of get my understanding of all the things going on in this position to go ahead and be confident enough to make a video on it. But hope everybody liked the 4 positions that we've been through there.